In July 1945, the USS Indianapolis, a Portland-class heavy cruiser, was assigned a top-secret mission that would place it at the heart of one of the most tragic naval disasters in American history. The ship was tasked with delivering critical components of the atomic bomb, Little Boy, including a uranium-235 projectile and other parts, to Tinian Island. These materials were essential for the bomb that would be dropped on Hiroshima just days later. The ship completed the mission on July 26, 1945, making a record-setting voyage from San Francisco to Tinian in just 10 days. After delivering the cargo, the Indianapolis was ordered to sail to Leyte Gulf in the Philippines to prepare for the expected invasion of Japan. Because of the mission's classified nature, her movement went unreported, and no one expected her arrival until several days later. This left the ship without escort and invisible to tracking systems, conditions that would prove disastrous. At approximately 12:15 a.m. on July 30th, while sailing through the Philippine Sea, the Indianapolis was struck by 2 torpedoes launched by Japanese submarine Richards 58, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Mochitsura Hashimoto. The first torpedo hit the bow, blowing it off and igniting fuel stores. The second struck amidships near a powder magazine, causing a massive secondary explosion. The explosion knocked out power, communications, and ruptured watertight compartments. Within 12 minutes, the ship had capsized and sunk. Many crew members were trapped below deck. Those who escaped were thrown into the sea, some burned, many without life vests, and few with access to lifeboats. Of the 1,196 crew aboard, about 900 made it into the water alive. The survivors found themselves scattered across miles of open ocean. Most were floating alone or in small clusters. Some clung to life rafts or debris, while others had only their Kapok life jackets. With no distress signal sent and no one aware the ship had gone down, the men were left without rescue or support for days. By the morning of July 30th, the sun was already punishing. Temperatures soared past 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Dehydration set in quickly. Some sailors resorted to drinking seawater, which led to salt poisoning, hallucinations, and in many cases, death. Wounds became infected, and fuel oil from the sinking ship coated many of the survivors, irritating skin and eyes. Oceanic white-tip sharks, known for their aggressive behavior and tendency to circle shipwrecks, began appearing shortly after dawn. They were drawn by the blood, the movement, and the sheer volume of men in the water. Survivors initially hoped the sharks would pass, but within hours, attacks began. The predators targeted isolated individuals and wounded men first. Survivors described seeing men pulled underwater in a flash, screams abruptly cut off, and bodies reappearing with limbs missing. The attacks were constant. Some men tried to punch the sharks or splash to scare them off, but nothing worked. Those in groups had slightly better odds, but the sharks were undeterred by numbers. Survivors rotated from the outside of the cluster inward to give everyone a chance to rest. But even this system offered little safety. As one survivor later stated, the sharks were always there. You'd feel them bump into you. Sometimes you'd see the fins coming, sometimes you wouldn't. By the second day, the situation had deteriorated dramatically. The sun, lack of food, and untreated injuries were taking their toll. The seawater-induced hallucinations became more intense. Some men imagined rescue ships or food. Others believed the sharks were illusions, or that they were back home. Many men died from exposure or despair. Others lost their minds, removing their life jackets and attempting to swim away. Some attacked their fellow sailors in confusion. As bodies accumulated, the sharks became more frenzied. Survivors had to push corpses away from the group to reduce attacks. Some men clung to floating bodies, hoping they would serve as decoys. The lack of fresh water was the most devastating factor. Rain fell briefly on the second day, and some men managed to catch a few mouthfuls. Others stared at the sky, praying for more. By the third day, the survivors' numbers had thinned. The ocean stretched endlessly in every direction. The dead floated among the living. Men lost hope. The hallucinations became darker. Some men thought their friends were enemies. Some believed sharks were people trying to help. One group of survivors aboard a half-submerged raft tried to organize shifts and encourage each other. keeping track of time as best they could. A few still held on to hope. Others had already given up. The sharks continued their attacks. Survivors described them as deliberate and efficient. They seemed to know which men were weakest. The dorsal fins circled, vanished, then chaos would erupt. On August 2nd, at around 10:25 a.m., a PV-1 Ventura bomber, piloted by Lieutenant Wilbur Gwynn, spotted an oil slick and then the heads of survivors bobbing in the water. He flew lower and confirmed what he was seeing. Dozens of men scattered across the ocean. He immediately dropped a radio buoy and alerted his base. Lieutenant Adrian Marks, piloting a PBY Catalina flying boat, was dispatched to the scene. Seeing the condition of the survivors, he made the risky decision to land his aircraft on the open sea, which was not designed for such use in rough water. He and his crew pulled 56 men aboard, laying them across the wings and inside the fuselage. Meanwhile, the USS Cecil J. Doyle and other ships were dispatched to the area. Doyle arrived around midnight and used searchlights to illuminate the water, helping rescue more survivors and providing a morale boost. By the end of the operation, 316 men had been rescued alive. The rescued men were in appalling condition. Many were covered in oil. Others had open wounds teeming with infection. Some were blind due to exposure or fuel damage to their eyes. Many had severe sunburn, dehydration, and signs of organ failure. Amputations were necessary in several cases. Survivors were taken to field hospitals and Navy installations for recovery. The U.S. Navy quickly launched an investigation. Despite the systemic communication failures that delayed rescue, the focus shifted to Captain Charles B. McVeigh III. He was charged with failing to zigzag, a maneuver designed to make ships harder to hit by submarines. During the court-martial, even the Japanese commander who had sunk the Indianapolis, Lieutenant Commander Hashimoto, testified that zigzagging would not have changed the outcome. Nevertheless, McVeigh was convicted. Many believed he was used as a scapegoat to protect Navy leadership and deflect attention from their errors. McVeigh's conviction haunted him. Though he remained in the Navy until retiring as a Rear Admiral, he received hate mail for decades from families of the dead. In 1968, he died by suicide. The story of the Indianapolis was largely overshadowed by the end of the war and the atomic bomb. But in the decades that followed, survivors fought to clear McVeigh's name. In 1996, a 6th grade student named Hunter Scott reignited public interest by conducting a project on the incident and presenting it to Congress. The efforts led to a formal investigation and bipartisan support for McVeigh's exoneration. In 2000, Congress passed a resolution clearing his name, and President Bill Clinton signed it into law. The Navy officially removed the conviction from McVeigh's record. The attacks during the Indianapolis disaster are considered the deadliest shark attacks on humans in history. Experts estimate that around 150 of the 900 initial survivors were killed by sharks. The predominant species involved was the oceanic whitetip, with tiger sharks also likely responsible. Oceanic whitetips are opportunistic predators known to follow ships and investigate disturbances. Their aggressive behavior and habitat in open ocean make them particularly dangerous in such situations. In the case of the Indianapolis, the large number of vulnerable humans in the water presented a rare and deadly opportunity for these predators. Of the 1,196 men aboard the USS Indianapolis, only 316 survived. Nearly 600 died from exposure, dehydration, and saltwater poisoning. An estimated 150 were killed by sharks. The rest were lost in the initial explosion or sank with the ship. The sinking of the Indianapolis remains a case study in wartime tragedy, compounded by communication, failure, and administrative oversight. The courage of the survivors, the brutality of the conditions, and the lessons learned continue to resonate through naval history. Today, memorials stand in several cities, and survivors reunite to honor their fallen comrades. Their story is taught in military academies and serves as a warning about the cost of complacency and the unforgiving nature of war at sea.